Hello, welcome back to the 2021 Chinese Canadian Leaders Summit. My name is Teresa Wu Paw, and I'm the co-chair of the summit, and I'm your host today. I want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. They were the original occupants of this land and continue to be here to this day. As mentioned yesterday, ACCT is saddened by the discovery of 751 unmarked graves near the former Maryaville Indian Residential School in Saskatchewan. Words cannot express how sad I am, and my heart goes out to the survivors, the families, and the Indigenous peoples. For those of you who have been attending this summit, you have heard me talk numerous times about the unique tie the Chinese Canadian community has with the Indigenous community. And even at my fireside chat with the Prime Minister, one of the questions was specifically about allyship with the Indigenous communities and what we as Chinese Canadians can do to help build a more diverse and equitable Canada. As a settler and immigrant, but also as fourth generation of my family in North America, descendant of the paper son and member of a family endured decades of separations and hardships due to the Chinese head tax and exclusion acts, that instilled in me an understanding on the generational impacts of racist policies and the fundamental need for systemic change to achieve real and sustained transformations. We grieve and stand in solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. We are joining the collective call for the Government of Canada to have concrete actions towards reconciliation and providing justice to the Indigenous communities, because this is the only way for us to dismantle systemic racism and all of us still face today, and move towards a more equitable Canada. So next, a bit of a recap and setting the context for today. So yesterday, we had another incredible opportunity to partake in conversations on the topic of civic engagement, started with Carol Lee and Fred, and then the plenary reflecting voices of recognized leaders from public services, the health sector, and activists, elected officer, accomplished artists, and the young activists, academia. Then broadening the conversation with all summit participants and leaders amongst us. And some of the highlights from the discussion include the use of arts and culture as vehicle for engagement and change, pride, the importance of instilling pride in the past, be proud of our identity and culture, and having hope for the future. The importance of self-learning of cultural identities and really look at how we could actually offer role modeling, for younger generations with our older generation. Attention on how our civic engagement can impact policies. And some of the key phrases we captured yesterday: start civic engagement early, start small, volunteerism as the beginning of civic engagement, the importance to how important it is to explore our passion and strength and build on it as our path for civic engagement. And some of the possible forms: speak up to social issues, recognize privilege and power, and empower marginalized groups, being ally of Chinese community members, promote Chinese culture, and engage in civic service, and reflect on some of the barriers, such as parenting, some traditional norms, self-imposed barriers, and believe that everyone can make a difference and embrace diversity. So those are some of the the highlights that we capture from yesterday's session. And today we'll talk about something that we have already started discussing over the last few sessions. What does a seat at the table mean for Chinese Canadians? We have the dynamic duo, Senator Wu and Tung, who will start us off, and then a diverse and powerful panel that will respond and share their experiences. But before I start, some housekeeping items. So closed captioning and translations. A reminder that closed captioning in English is provided by AirMeet. And under my video, we'll see a button that says CC. You can click on that for English captions. For captions in French, Chinese, or any other language, we're using Wordly. So please look at the chat for instructions on how to access translated captions. Our support team is in the chat if you have any questions or need any help. Please note that this is only available for the keynote and plenary discussion. So a little bit about the code of conduct and abuse management during this summit. As mentioned before, the goal of our summit is to provide a safe space for everyone to have an open and deep dialogue. So in the program booklet that was sent out to you earlier, we had indicated a set of guidelines, and we'll link it in the chat, but just want to remind you to be respectful of our speakers, the staff, volunteers, and your fellow attendees. To ensure a safe, welcoming, and inclusive environment for all attendees, we ask that you read through the guidelines in the program booklet if you haven't done so already. Today, we do have a post-summit session, Disappearing Chinatown session. So there's a strategic session happening today at 1:30 Mountain Time. And there are a number of working groups trying to save the city's own Chinatown. And at this session, the working group will share the efforts to protect, revitalize, and rebuild significant cultural spaces for cities across Canada. So for those of you who have indicated you're interested in participating, you should have received a Zoom link on this. If you haven't received it yet, please contact events@actfoundation.ca. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Justin Poi, who is representing Lai Dak Wai Holding Limited, who is the platinum sponsor of the Leader Summit. Justin Poi is the president and creative director of the Justin Poi, a niche full-service advertising agent based in Toronto. His agency also helped ACCT brand our civic leadership training program, and the tagline, Aspire to Lead, was created by Justin and his team. Established in 1993, Justin has led the agency to win over 15 international creative awards. He's often quoted in advertising and marketing media, and particularly in automotive marketing media. So Justin is a frequent speaker at digital conferences across North America, including the Canadian Digital Dealer Conference, Digital Dealer USA, and the New Car Dealers of BC Dealer Day. Justin also is a recipient of the Queen's Golden and Diamond Jubilee medals for philanthropy and community activism. So over to you, Justin.
Great, thank you very much, Teresa, and good morning, everybody. You will notice that one of the sponsors of this event is Lai Dak Wai Holdings. Lai Dak Wai. Lai Dak Wai is actually my mother's Chinese name. My mother, Vivian, is was the first senator of Asian descent in Canada. And I thought I would tell you sort of my story and how she got me involved with the community and getting so involved. So I grew up in Canada in the 1970s, and back then in popular culture, well, you guys know that there's a new Marvel movie coming out, Shang-Li, The Legend of Shang-Li. Shang-Li's original father was Fu Manchu, which is basically probably the blackface equivalent in the Chinese culture. They actually changed that character in the movie to another character called the Mandarin. I don't know if it's less offensive, but that's the environment I grew up. You know, David Carradine playing an Asian person doing kung fu, Hop Sing, the Chinese cook in Bonanza. That was the environment I grew up in. It was very tough to be cool. And as you know, when you become a leader as an adult, it starts when you are young. You know, leading student council, sports teams. It was tough growing up in the 70s here. But simply put, I mean, I hated being Chinese as a kid. I remember the defining moment. I was 5 years old. I climbed up on the counter in the washroom and I could see my face for the first time. And I was actually pretty shocked that I didn't look like everybody else in my class. I thought I was white up until that point. And it was then that I sort of realized as time went on that I was going to have to work harder, I was going to have to be smarter, and I was going to have to be more innovative in order to stand out. Now, if I fast forward to university, when I graduated, and I graduated from the radio and television broadcasting school at Ryerson, again, you know, looking at television, popular culture, Yeah, there really weren't a lot of ethnic minorities, never mind Chinese, on television. It was my mother when I was in my early 20s who, I don't know if she asked me to volunteer or kind of coerced me to volunteer, but she asked me to volunteer for the Monsheng Foundation. Now, at that time, they needed to come up with a fundraiser. She created an annual fundraising gala called the Cathay Ball, which to this day still runs. And she got me involved to get to know the Chinese community here. And you know what? Once I joined, I was hooked. And it was great because all of a sudden I felt like here I am, 23 years old. I'm sitting at the same table, referring to vice presidents of banks and presidents of banks as on the first name basis. It was a great feeling. But we have to look at why some of those Chinese charities started to begin with. A lot of them came here a long time ago. They wanted to get involved in the wider Canadian community. They really weren't let in, so they started their own charities. They started their own seniors' homes. But something happened in the mid-90s. All the so-called mainstream organizations, Heart and Stroke Foundation, Canadian Cancer Society, they all wanted to get in on the Chinese community. They all created the Chinese chapter, the Chinese committees, Chinese this, Chinese that. And that was a great time because I was able to then get involved in those communities. And that was sort of a bridge to a larger community. Now, something happens, when you join those committees, because eventually you can potentially be, invited to the board, and that's really what you want. You may get appointed to the board because you're Chinese, but once you're on the board, you have the same voice and same seat as everybody. Since then, joining those little committees, I've sat on the board of Sick Kids Foundation, the Kidney Foundation, Walrus Magazine. I've sat on a lot of government boards, Ontario Media Development Corporation, Trillium Gift of Life Network for organ donation. Getting on the board is only half the battle. If you have connections, that's half the battle. Once you're on the board, you have to do the work. If you can't do the work, doesn't matter who your connections are, you will not make it. The ACT Leadership Summit is a fantastic place to meet the right people, have the right conversation. I've never taken for granted the connections that I've been, that have opened for me. But not everybody is fortunate to have maybe a family member that can help them or a family member that's even encouraging. But this is the kind of venue where you can really take advantage of that. And all it takes is one introduction to completely change your life. Everyone I speak to in the Chinese community, especially this past year, has said, we need to amplify our voice and we need to increase our influence. And this can be done in so many ways. You can join a board. You can, like you've been speaking over this conference, you can get involved in civic life, run for office, but everybody can make a difference in their own way. There's so much opportunity now, especially if you're in your early 20s and 30s. There's just, I look at the evolution of the time I started in the early 90s till now, huge. So, I hope that if you build up connections here, you will pass them on to the next generation too. That's what I'm trying to do for my own kids. And you're here for a reason. You have the initiative to come to this conference and spend your weekends online staring at your screen. So obviously you want to do it. So it's really a matter of just taking the next step. On behalf of my mother, Vivian, and myself, congratulations to all of you and enjoy the ACT Summit.
Well, thank you so much, Justin, for your support and for Lai Tak Wai Holdings Limited support. And thank you for sharing your stories about the importance of representation and your civic engagement. I'm sure it resonated so much with me about growing up in the 70s and the influence of our parents on our civic engagement. So thank you for sharing that. And it's really, all of our speakers at this summit really are sharing our collective story. And that's why, it's so powerful and emotional for so many of us here. So, and they say it takes a village to raise a child. And in this case, it takes a community with the same vision to help build a more equitable Canada. So thank you for your and Honorable Vivian Poy's continued support. Now it's my honor to introduce you to our keynote speakers. Let me first welcome the Honorable Yuan Wu. Appointed to the Senate of Canada in November 2016, the Honorable Yuan Wu sits as an independent representing British Columbia, and is the leader of the largest group in the Senate. Originally from Singapore, Senator Wu has worked on public policy issues related to Canada's relations with Asian countries for more than 30 years. From 2005 to 2014, he was the president and CEO of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. He's also a Senate Fellow at Simon Fraser University's Graduate School of Business and at the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs at the University of British Columbia. He also served on the advisory boards of the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation, Mosaic Institute, the Canadian Ditchley Foundation, and the York Center for Asian Research. Tung is a director of Canadian Foundation of Economic Education. He retired as the honorary captain of the Canadian Navy and is the former chief executive officer of Success, an immigrant service nonprofit organization. Tung is also an immediate past chair of the board of the Canadian Museum of Immigration at Pier 21. And he has served in leadership positions in numerous civic, cultural, business, and educational organizations, including serving as a counselor for the City of Vancouver. And also involved with the Richmond Public Library, board member of the Asia Pacific Foundation, and Metropolis, BC, and as campaign cabinet member for the United Way of the Lower Mainland. In 2002, Tung was awarded the Queen's Jubilee Medal in recognition of his contribution to the community. In 2014, Tung was invested into the Order of British Columbia. Thank you, Honorable Wu and Tung, for joining us today. Now, I would like to introduce you the moderator, who needs no introduction as she has been your host for the past couple of sessions, my co-chair, Patti Pon. And of course, Patti is the president and CEO of Calgary's Arts Development, also a platinum sponsor of our summit. She is a veteran community and arts champion with an extensive track record of leadership and service in Calgary and beyond. She's also the first Chinese Canadian woman to sit on the Calgary Stampede board as an elected member. We're very, very proud. And so over to you, Patti, Senator Wu, and Tung Chen.
Thank you so much, Teresa, and it is my great honor to be able to moderate this discussion with two such illustrious leaders. Many of us who are here today as summiteers, as somebody described us, are very familiar with the leadership and the paths that you both have forged here. And so I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Maybe we can start off. You are the only pair who we invited to both write on the same topic. And I know that you both have read each other's papers and know each other. So I wonder if we might start off with just getting some reflections from each of you about the other's paper and how and your thoughts on that. So Senator Wu, why don't we start with you?
Yes, thank you, Patti. Good morning to everyone, and congratulations to you, Patti and Teresa, and the terrific team behind this event. Great to be a summiteer and great to be back on the mountain, so to speak. I really enjoyed reading Tung's paper and was struck by, I know him, I've known him for many years, but I didn't know all of the things that he has done in his illustrious career in a variety of fields, of course, as a city councillor, as a banker, and at Success. But what struck me about his really quite brief description was how practical he has been in trying to find ways for the table, so to speak, that he has been able to get to be expanded, and to allow for others to also approach the table, if not to sit at it. And the examples that he cited from his time at City Hall, at the bank, and more broadly in community life are, I think, should be an inspiration for those of you who are listening, who are also looking for very tangible acts that can be taken to expand your tables.
Thank you. And former Councillor Chen, what are your thoughts about the Senator's paper?
Well, I want to echo that remark that Senator Wu started with, is that congratulations to the organizers and all of the people who participated. This is wonderful. Last time I couldn't attend because you have to travel to Edmonton. This time, virtual, and I can attend in my own home, in my own state. This is fantastic. Reading Paul's paper is much more elegant and much more highbrow than the one that I put, and I was just sharing my own experiences, right? And so there are many, many, many good points, and which one of the biggest one that I really like is the one about the governance reform. Because if we don't change the system, it's the same old, and people, politicians and people in power can always talk. But without a concrete action plan like the one that Senator Wu was suggesting, we'll never get there. You can only look at what is happening in our boardrooms. But I do find some other things that I find that I want to challenge a little bit later on in the other segment of what Senator Wu says. But I'll keep that later. But back on the positive side, yeah, Senator Powell mentioned that we need more people to step forward, quality people to come forward and to serve on so many different tables. And that's really important. And the idea of that when we are in power and we're in a position to speak, that we can change the narratives. And I think that is another critical thing that we all need to pile on to make sure that change of narratives can do. Right now in the public domain, there's only probably two voices. One from the Chinese Canadian community. The other one is from the shall we say, the white community, the Anglo community. We need to have a third narrative that encompasses of both the Chinese Canadian community and the Anglo community, and forge a new narrative that is totally Chinese Canadian, looking at things from a Chinese Canadian perspective, incorporating the Chinese value as well as the Canadian value. We have to create our own voice. Right now, we just don't have it. And I think that is important when we have a seat at the table.
Thank you. And I think that's an interesting question, because both of you pose in your papers that this might be an iterative process. There are steps that you can take now in an attempt to change as we see more representation. And I think you both spoke to current circumstances. Even though we've had 40 years of a multiculturalism policy, efforts for equity, inclusion, all of those things, even though the 3 rules that you, Senator, talk about in terms of the needs, there's still this notion of, to be at the table, you need to understand the ground rules that are somebody else's rules. So as we think about this changing narrative, Tung, that you're talking about, what are the things in the meantime for those of us who maybe have seats at the table, like the Calgary Stampede, and I'm by myself? What do I do in the meantime? What are things you might offer to, as we try to change that table from the seat, from inside? Tung, why don't we start with you on this one?
Sure. Thanks for that wonderful question. I think before I even go there, I think it's also important that when we are able to get there, how much preparation we have to make. I've listened to Paul's discussion before in other forums, and it suggests that, first of all, you have to be successful first. Be a successful person, formulate your own ideas, and then so when you get a chance to sit on the table, that you can make some impact, that you can look at things from what you've learned in the past. And I think that's extremely important. So to answer your questions, is to look at things from a fresh point of view. a point of view that is informed by your life experiences and your experiences living a Chinese Canadian life. Now, that's not to mean that you have always to think about it from that perspective or try to be representing the Chinese Canadian community, but you should always be aware. And I think I shouldn't use the word should. But in my own example, I always keep in mind that I am a representative of that community. I don't represent that community, but I'm a representative of that community. So I have to, in all aspects, very conscientiously bring to bear what I can do and what the community that I come from, how they would see it from that perspective, what they would need to do. So in your situation, perhaps, Patti, I'm sitting in that board, looking at what the board is doing. I may say, okay, if a fresh immigrant, fresh off the plane, what other things, what other barriers are there? How can I, sitting at this table, to affect changes, to make that and propose that? Now, that, of course, is not to say that you ignore everything else. I think that's the key point that we really want to make people understand, is that when we do what we do, take a page from the gender war that was fought by the feminists. Take a look at the LGBTQ communities. They have, in those communities that I highlighted, they have had great politicians who care about everything else, what's happening around them in the country, but they always never shied away from issues that deal with their own community, be it feminist, be it gay and lesbian and queers and questioning people. So I think that's the kind of things that I would suggest that people who have a seat at the table to do.
Thank you for that. And Senator Wu.
Right. Well, if you have a seat at the table, the first thing you have to make sure of is that you allow for the entry of others to also have seats at that same table. And that means making sure that the processes for selecting board members allow for the kind of diversity that benefits the organization. And I talk about that in my paper. I call it governance reform. That's a bit grandiose a term, but there are lots of things that boards do that are essentially based on old boys networks. And I use boys deliberately as opposed to girls, because they are boys networks mostly. And you have the ability to change some of the framing such that there can be new entrants to the board. But within the board itself, in your ongoing function as a board member, I think the key is to bring to the decision making of that board the diversity for which you were presumably sought to be on the board for in the first place. And I use diversity rather than Chineseness necessarily because I'm actually a bigger proponent of cognitive diversity than I am of color diversity, for example. It's quite conceivable, that a board that's racially diverse, ethnically diverse, is actually very similar in all other respects because cognitively they all have the same views. And that, to me, doesn't really do any good for the organization or indeed for the advancement of society, because I'm betraying my prejudices here, but I think ideas matter. And if you come from an upbringing where you have ideas that are formed that, present differently because you grew up in Hong Kong, for example, or because you went to school in South Korea, those are going to shape your ideas in ways that have to come out, that should come out when you have a seat at the table. If they don't come out, then you're kind of betraying the reason why you got to the board in the first place.
Right. And so in this time where we're encountering again that rise in anti-Asian racism, a deeper recognition of the underrepresentation, perhaps more of an understanding at some of the mainstream or dominant culture communities. We heard last week from one of our keynotes, Tessica Trong, who said, well, why does there have to be a table at all? Or who says the table has to be like that? So in the spirit of that kind of disruption and that change, where are the opportunities that you see in terms of the tables changing? And Senator, I know you speak to those three elements that you see as ways in which to get to those seats and cause that change. But are there movements afoot or various policies that you're seeing from where you both sit that are sort of kind of the tipping points for us to think about those different tables, or that maybe it's not a table, might be a campfire, I don't know. Anything there that you're seeing? Tung, let's go with you first.
Oh, I thought you were asking Senator Wu to talk first, but anyways, I'll try that.
Okay.
No, that's okay. I'll try that. Former politicians, every time I give you a microphone, I'll talk. The thing is this. Yes, I love that kind of notion of who cares, who needs the table. Let's totally destroy it and start from fresh. I would say that when I was 20, but having lived now, I'm almost 70, is that there are realities that we cannot escape. To destroy the table, meaning we start from fresh. It can happen. In fact, it is happening. If you look at the social media, if you can look at where people can simply use TikTok or YouTube and Facebook and become famous and influence the whole entire world. So to that extent, I applaud that idea. Let's move forward. If we have good ideas, good suggestions, let's go. Let's do it. Don't wait. Why do I have to sit on the table? Right? So do it now. But the reality, unfortunately, is that we still have systems that there are tables that make decisions that impact all of us. They could be tables that set policy for the entire country. There could be tables that simply set the rules for a little club somewhere in your community. So we have to sit at the table. The reason why I decided not to write a theoretical paper and to talk about, in theory, if we have on the table, we have a better voice, we're better represented, and yada, 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 but rather offer up my own example. That really go totally against my grain of training. I was trained to be humble. I was trained to be self-defecate. You threw out the word. It's not okay. And not to try to blow my own horns. But I decided to go against my training because I think it's important to show people that there are so many different tables simply by having someone, and I love that word, Pao, the cognitive divergency or cognitive diversity. That we have more people. Now, I said earlier on that I have some issues with some of the points that made by Pao. So I'm going to offer that up. I can't wait anymore. It's got to get off my chest, right? There are a couple of points. The first one is that I've been a banker for 28 years. And in banking and in management, we always believe in one thing. What gets measured gets done. And I understand Pao advocating against simply measuring by number. I get it because I've been in this sphere of trying to increase representation since 1976 when I got the city of Vancouver set up its first equal employment opportunity program. So I get it. But if we don't measure, we need to have some yardstick to measure, even if as an indicator, as a trend line. You look at what the feminists are doing, increasing female participation in boardrooms. They have been publishing that, pushing for that. The problem that we have now, and as Pao has correctly pointed out, is that people might have the same racial background or racial profile, but cognitively, if not, they hold the same view, then it won't work. But until we have a better proxy to measure that, then we need to have some numbers. So that's number one. Number two is his suggestion that, which I totally agree with, that be prepared, and when you get on that table, hopefully you are qualified to sit on that table. And as Justin earlier said, once you open the door and you sit in there, you have the same power and the same influence as everybody else. So you got to be prepared. However, my personal experience and what I've seen in many public offices is that they might not be prepared. They might not be ready. But once in that position, they grow because they're in that environment. It's almost like when you throw somebody in the water in order to survive, they'll learn how to swim. And that is the message I want to give to the participants, is that don't wait until you are ready to go. If you have the opportunity, grab it. Even if you don't have the opportunity, create one for yourself. If the other systems, as Pao is advocating, change the governance format and change it for the selective process, can include yourself, jump at it. Don't wait until you're well trained. Don't wait until you can do public speaking. My first public speaking, I shook so violently. The piece of paper that I was holding actually fell out, and I had to say, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, I can't go on anymore." Right? So now, if you give me a microphone, I'll yak. Right? So I'll stop now. I'm gonna stop.
Well, Senator, it looks like you have a couple of rebuttals to make, and then also our question.
No, nothing to rebut at all. Tung is absolutely right. If you aspire to a leadership position and you have the will and the drive, you should go for it, and don't let somebody else's artificial benchmark or standard be an obstacle for you. You owe it to yourself. As I said in my paper, we should not let our community, the Chinese community, be defined by the number of Chinese faces that there are around a particular table or a particular set of tables. There are many Chinese Canadians who define success not by the tables that we might designate as important, and they have other tables that they want to sit at. And you will see in my paper that the most important point about having a seat at the table, as I do, is to recognize that there are many other tables that people want to sit at, and they are worthy and important and should be encouraged, particularly tables that are nascent and are just being formed, which we can't even fully conceive of. And the session last week with Tessica and others is a hint at what they might be. I don't really know what they will be, how they will evolve, but it's clear that younger people are thinking about different ways of organizing themselves, different ways of influencing society, and they are going to build their own tables. And those of us who are more mature, shall we put it that way, mature in an age sense, not in any other normative sense, have to be open to the formation of new tables and to encourage these as well. But I want to say also that being at the table is both a assimilative as well as a subversive act. It's assimilative in the sense that you have to play the game. You have to follow the rules. You have to understand the objectives of the organization. You have to understand your fiduciary responsibilities, as they call it, and discharge them responsibly. But because if we accept the notion that the playing field is tilted, right, that the norms are arbitrary, that the frameworks are not necessarily the only frameworks, that we have something to bring that's not quite yet captured in the organization, then that role you play is not assimilative, it's subversive. And this is why I say in my second point about how to help people get on the table, is that I have to, as a mentor, to use kind of a slightly uncomfortable term, you not only have to help aspiring table sitters to know which fork to use, which napkin to put on the lap or on your collar, how to sit, where to sit, when to speak. All of that you need to do, but you also need, over time, to introduce some new dishes to the table. You need a bit of pei tan from time to time, or some feng zhao, or some ngao lam that the table doesn't like. But you need to constantly try and introduce these items. Otherwise, you're not making the longer term contribution. Now I'm getting hungry after talking about pei tan.
Yeah, me too.
It's lunchtime here in Ottawa.
Yeah, it's when after today's session, there are the national groups are getting together to talk about Chinatowns. So I think we may be on a bit of a food topic here over the course of today. Sadly, we're getting very close to the end of our time. And so I'd like to invite each of you to make any kind of closing remarks, as it relates to the things you have again identified in your conversations. I love that context of assimilative as well as subversive in terms of the seats that when we get our seats at the table. And Tung, to your point about, how do we continue to fight through that upbringing that said, be humble, don't take the limelight, don't try and grab something or be too aggressive or too overconfident. As for those of us who have those seats at the table as the mentors, what's the advice you have for maybe us to try and pave the way for the Tessicas of the world and for others who do not yet have that seat or have identified that seat at the table? This whole conference is about civic engagement. And I loved what you both said about many tables. It isn't only about the one table or the two tables. So what's that wisdom? What's that advice you have to connect to others like us, maybe, to find those tables? What do you have to share?
First thing first is to suggest is to listen more to speakers like Pao. Every time I listen to him, I learn new things, right? Disruptive, assimilative, fantastic. Those are the concepts. And cognitive diversity. Those are concepts. And I think that's the first thing that people need to do is to open their minds up, to learn more conceptually. Because you know what? How you think would drive how you behave. And that comes to another thing, and that is to be very much, you have to be self-confident, to have to believe in oneself. We always say, I can't see myself doing that. Why? Because you just don't have the role model. We now have role models like Pao. You can look up and say, I can see myself doing that. So create that self-confidence inside, and then decide that what you want to do. My definition of success is not measured by money, is not measured by fame, but it's measured by the goal that you set for yourself and that you are able to achieve it. And then try to go around and try to open yourself up and seek opportunities to find a seat either at a table that's existing or create a table for yourself. Because once you create that goal for yourself, once you have that self-confidence, then you can move forward as an individual and as a contributing to this a member to this society. I think that people can, and coming to this, for people who participate in this, already mean that you are motivated to be a leader. And so now the next thing is to continue that path, and hopefully we'll see many of the participants either as elected official or in big board rooms or in community center boards or simply as the PTA member.
Well, I want to go back to what I said about Tung's paper when I made my opening remarks. There are lots of practical things that can be done at all levels of civic engagement, let's call it that generally, and you should go for it basically, and don't let somebody else define whether you're qualified or not. If you've got a good idea, push it. And it may or may not succeed. But ambition is important, self-confidence is important. So I totally agree with Tung on those points. I think there's a special responsibility for those of us who have seats at tables to really clear the way, to open the doors, to change the menu, whatever metaphor you want, so that others can come into the restaurant, and make the buffet bigger, if you will. And that is not easy. And you have to achieve a certain level of acceptance in mainstream society before you can even talk about these things. But just to give a simple example, we should be a lot less hung up about accents, right? I mean, I have a particular accent, which is generally acceptable. But there are lots of people, particularly from the mainland, who speak with a style of English that people are very uncomfortable with, but they make perfect sense. And in fact, they make more sense sometimes than people who speak perfect English. But we don't listen to them because they have an accent. I mean, it's worse. Sometimes it's because they have a name that starts with the letter Z, or J. And we really have to fight that hard, because I worry that this spike we see in anti-Asian racism it's going to be, we're veering a little bit here, but it's going to be very much centered, particularly on Chinese from the mainland. And they are forming a very large part of our population here. And we need to actively counter it at all levels of society, even setting aside questions about whether they sit at tables or not.
That totally makes sense, Pao. As I alluded to in my paper, I said on two CRTC mandated review panel for CBC News National after 2 elections. I started criticizing the CTV News of not interviewing people with a slight accent or looks anything non-white, because even today, to this day, even they accepted my recommendation. Even to this day, if you notice, in election time, they don't have too many people with an accent in the news. That simply is not right, and so that battle has to continue. But that's what's important, though, is getting back to Pao's point of when you're at the table, create an appetite for other people around the table for new things. That is so important. I use a more mundane case of looking at for example, at syncing the system or at 911, creating for people to have different language they can use. But it's not always that easy. And that I want to bring another point. We have to develop that skill set of how to bring people on board, how to compromise if it's possible without breaking the principle or achieving what we want to do, but also importantly, how to network with other people on the board or at the table that you're sitting with to find a way so they see the perspective that you're seeing. Those things need skill. And those things, you don't wait until you get to the table to learn that skill. I've seen people who thought they can become a counselor and then, I can do all kinds of things. Little did they know that if they want to make motion, they need another people to second it. And also, even you make the motion, you have someone second it, put it on the table. If you don't have the majority to vote with you, you're not going anywhere. So that political skill really is needed. And I think Pao is a good example in the Senate that he's elected as the leader of the non-aligned senators. That takes political skill. Those skills can be learned and can be taught. So get a mentor. Get someone like Senator Pao to be your mentor.
Well, I think someone like Senator Pao or yourself, former Councillor Chen, this has just been a wonderful conversation, and we're now going to invite more members to join us in this discourse that you have started us on. So thank you both very, very much for this time. It's been my great pleasure and honor. We'll have you back at the breakout sessions, and we look forward to the continuing with you. But in the meantime, I'd now like to introduce our next moderator, Lai-King Him, who will moderate our next panel conversation. Lai-King is active in equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives in the legal profession and judiciary, as well as other areas. She runs a busy employment law boutique, appointed as part-time deputy judge in Toronto Small Claims, and also bilingual counsel for the Law Society of Ontario's Discrimination and Harassment Council program, as well as just recently becoming president of the Ontario Deputy Judges Association. Please join me in welcoming Lai-King Him. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Patti. Has everyone joined our group yet? I see Mary Ng, Daniel, and we may be missing one more person. Oh, yes, and Yung Woo is here. Okay, so thank you very much for that introduction. I have the distinct honor and pleasure to moderate this session and continue and deepen the discourse we've had this morning on what does a seat at the table mean for Chinese Canadians. We will get further perspectives from our esteemed panelists. I will introduce everyone briefly. For everyone who wants to see their full bios, they are in the Summit Program booklet. I can tell you that this group of panelists will be frank and fulsome in their discussions. First, and not really needing any introduction, we have Minister Mary Ng, Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade. Next, a trailblazer, Daniel Quan-Watson, Deputy Minister of Crown, Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Canada. Then we have inspiring woman of business, Patti Pon, President and founder of Redwood Classics Apparel, a Canadian garment manufacturer. And finally, the incomparable Yung Woo, CEO of the Mars Discovery District. So welcome to all the panelists.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi. So we have just heard thought-provoking discussions with Senator Yun Wu and Tung. To trigger further perspectives on today's topic, I have a common question for each of you. Each of you are prominent leaders in your area, and it can be said that you are already firmly at the table, helping to shape the important conversations, narratives, and decisions that are shaping our country. So I have a two-part question. First, what thoughts would you share about getting to the proverbial seat at the table? And second, what does having that seat mean to you? And do I have a volunteer to start? I'm going to point to someone otherwise.
I'll start.
All right, Kathy.
Quite honestly, I don't even know if I'm at the seat, right? At the table. That's something we had spoke about before.
Yes.
How do you even recognize when you're at the table? I think if you lead your life following your North Star, I didn't quite understand that it's called civic engagement, but I've always just kind of followed what my family values were. And that's how we've always approached our business. And it just so happens to be about people, planet, and profit and wanting to build a sustainable business model. That has in itself parlayed into, recognition and award. And quite honestly, I didn't even see myself as a leader. I just thought I was putting my head down as most Asians were supposed to do, right? Work hard. But the purpose was always to, give back to our makers and to, continue producing as much Canadian production and maintain it in Canada. So I don't think I saw myself as a leader. I don't think that I would even still recognize myself as a leader. I just know that I'm doing what I think is the right thing. And the other thing I've also learned over the last few years is that self-confidence is so important. I think what I've been able to do, and a lot of self-reflecting, especially throughout COVID, is recognizing that the work ethics that I've been able to, hone over the years due to, let it be our family upbringing that happens to be, I think, pretty common amongst a lot of Chinese families, is amazing work ethics. And then also relationship building. I've been able to surround myself with allies and allyship without even recognizing I was doing that. And it's a little bit sad, but I feel like I was recognized as a leader and being recognized outside of my own community or even myself, right? And so it's like we're being validated. I feel like we had to get validated, or myself, my journey. And then the third thing is just passion. I've been really true to myself and what's important to our business. And Made in Canada has always been very important and will continue to be important. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I would say, it's work ethics, relationship building, and being very passionate and true to yourself.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing the three, important values that you have in getting to that seat at the table. Maybe we will go to Daniel. Daniel, what are your thoughts on thoughts can you share on getting to that seat at the table, which you have, and what does that mean to you?
Well, I think going back, and thank you, and wonderful to be here with all of these fantastic panelists. I'm coming to you from Treaty 6 territory in Edmonton and home of the Métis Nation of Alberta. And I just want to say I particularly appreciate Teresa's comments at the early part about the remains that were discovered earlier this week. Given that it's an area of responsibility of mine, I'm especially thankful for that. I think there are many different types of tables, going back to the previous sets of comments. Canada is built on an economy, it's built on community, it's built on social justice, it's built on governance, it's built on science, it's built on so many different things. We all understand how hard it is to get into the NHL. I just want to compare this for a little bit. 320 Canadians play in the NHL. There are 40 federal cabinet ministers. That means it's about 8 times harder to get to be a federal cabinet minister than to get in the NHL for a Canadian. If you want to run Mars, the board that runs that can go around the globe. There isn't a person qualified to do that on the globe that wouldn't jump at the chance to go and do that. They chose young. The number of Canadian corporations that can say that they survived, that they thrived, that they innovated, and they did it while manufacturing their products in Canada, I don't know of anybody else who did that. And so if you look at these tables, they are extraordinarily hard to get to. And as Kathy just pointed out, they're extraordinarily hard to even define. All of the people that I've ever met who were the most looking just to do the right thing were the people who least understood the impact that they were having. And what I would say is this, for those of us who are at these tables, number one, we have to do everything that all of our predecessors did. I, as a deputy minister in the federal government, as Minister Ing would have in her office, I have a long corridor and I have a photo of every single one of my predecessors going back, in my case, to 1876. I am the very first one, and in each of my 5 deputy minister appointments, I've always been the very first one to look different from all of the rest, each and every time. I've had to do all of the things that they had to do, but I had to do a couple of different things. One of which was to actually do proof of concept. And if that sounds strange in Canada in 2021, understand that in all of the hundreds and thousands of opportunities to appoint a Chinese Canadian to a deputy minister's position in the previous 100 and whatever years, the answer was no every single time. So, well, I was proving that I could do the job, just as Young's proving that he can do the job, Kathy's proving that she's doing the job, the minister's proving that she can do the job. We're still, most of us, either early enough in the process or the very first, that we're demonstrating that anybody like us can do the job as well. And that's a particular weight to bear, and it's a particular accomplishment. But what is success for me is doing many of the things my predecessors did, but helping the institution understand gaps it never knew it understood, understand opportunities that it never knew that it had, and to inspire, support, and activate people who thought that they would always be on the sidelines. And if I can do those things with my seat at the table, then I think I've done something that's worthwhile. And then the last part of it is to make sure that whoever my successors are, whether or not it's the first Black Deputy Minister of Crown Indigenous Relation Northern Affairs, the first person with disabilities, the first openly gay or lesbian person who heads up the department at some point in time in the future, that they never have to do proof of concept again. And if I can remove that from the equation, they can be free to work on all of those other things. And it's one of the realities, I think, when you're either the first or you're still unusual.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for those insights. Let's go to Minister Ng. Mary.
Well, thank you so much, Lai-King, and it's really terrific to be here. Good to see you, Yuan. Good to see you, Kathy. Deputy, is wonderful to be here with you at the same table. But before I begin, let me acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Wendat people. And for those of us who are settlers or even immigrants to Canada, it's really important to recognize that Indigenous peoples have always been here and that we all have a role to play as Canadians in reconciliation. And this work is especially important, and I was really pleased that Teresa also started today's session with this acknowledgement, but also with, with the words about the tragic and very horrifying news of this most recent discovery of hundreds of children whose lives were taken at residential schools. And it's really important that we recognize the terrible legacy of residential schools in this country and the role that we all have to play in the ongoing efforts moving forward. So I wanted to start there, and I always start there. I think that for me as a public service leader, and especially one that represents the Canadian government, it's important to share this as a way for all of us as Canadians to continue on this truth journey and understanding it, and learn about what we might be able to do and contribute in reconciliation. In this, I know that a couple of my colleagues are here with me, so I just want to say a brief hello to members of Parliament. Jean Yip is here. I know Sean Chen is here, and I know that that Han Dong is here as well. So it's really great that I have colleagues. They sent me a text a couple of days ago, said, like, listen, we'll be there in case you need someone to, kind of clap at you or something. I said, well, but to your question, Lai, and what a terrific conversation we've already been having with Tung and with Senator Wu and with all of you. I think that this journey to the table, I would agree with Kathy, because and I think Kathy sort of articulated sort of an element that might be in addition, particular not only as a Chinese Canadian, so as a racialized Canadian, but also as a woman. I never really thought about my work, and certainly my work I always thought about my work about doing impact in my job. So if I did impact, then I was truly, sort of serving my best self and doing my best work. And then to what I think Tung and others have said around our upbringing of being, humble and our nose to the grindstone. I think Kathy said that too. That was also, that's what you grow up with, and that's in fact what you do. So, but I also understood that when I looked around, there really weren't people who look like me. And I love the idea that that Daniel just said right now about needing a proof of concept. And that is the responsibility. It's to be able to be the very best that you can be in the roles that we get to occupy at this table, so that others see that it is not only possible, but that there are real viable pathways. It isn't pathways without difficulty or hardship, but it is an opportunity at this table to create understandings, to create allyship, to be the very best that you can, in an effort to have the common. Senator, the senator's paper talked about developing capacities. I call it a Canadian curriculum. We need to teach the Canadian curriculum to people who need to understand the standard operating principles, the rules. And I think by us being here doing the work that we are doing, we've learned the rules. We are working within them. We are helping to bring light to our unique perspective because of who we are and our own experiences. And that as Chinese Canadians, bringing that to the table to seek greater understanding, to build more allyship. And I think we all have a dual responsibility to be the very best that we are, which I think helped get us to this table. I don't believe for a second I got here because of my ethnicity. I think I got here because of the commitment to the work. And as Kathy said, I use that term too, my true north. I think when I'm doing things that are my true north, then I'm doing the right things. But I think now occupying a seat at the table, it really is, how do I open those doors? How do I create better understanding? How do I create allyship? How do I correct misunderstandings? And how do I be my very best self so that particularly the younger generation are seeing that it is not only possible, but you can do it differently. It doesn't have to also be this way. And being at the ACT Summit this time around and seeing the richness of the conversations that have taken place and the convening of so many extraordinary Canadians who are contributing so many conversations. I think we're on this journey and this path. There is no question more work to do, but I do think that there is a dual responsibility for those of us who have the privilege of being at this table. And sometimes, while it is outside your comfort zone to be humble, and it takes actual work, there's a bit of responsibility to do that too.
Thank you, Mary. That was thank you for sharing your thoughts and your own path. I want to turn now to Yung, who to get your perspectives.
Well, sometimes there's disadvantages to being with a Y and a W as the initials, because after the three of you, I feel like we should just drop the microphone and go to questions. But I so appreciated hearing, I think, your perspectives, which are absolutely critical and unique. And before I begin, I also would like to acknowledge that I'm beaming in from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Anishinaabe and Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples. I think it's really a time where not only that acknowledgement means something, but in terms of our own shared experience, we can take many lessons from there. So yes, my name is Yung Wu. I'm the CEO of the Mars Discovery District. I came out of retirement to lead this institution about 3.5 years ago. Had no idea what I was coming into. My first event, actually, Mary was there. And Minister Ang gave me this really huge welcome, and I felt instantly comfortable because I was connected to someone that actually knew what the heck this job might entail. And she didn't convince me to quit on day one. So Mary, I still remember that and so appreciated that. It was definitely an experience where, as a serial entrepreneur and most people would call me a compulsive entrepreneur for all of my life, it was a little bit daunting to come back out of retirement into Mars. I treasured my anonymous retirement and my anonymity as an entrepreneur. Mars is the furthest thing from that I can figure out. So Mary, thank you for that. I still remember that very, very fondly. For myself, my family immigrated from my native Taiwan when I was 5 years old. And as a child, I still remember we landed in a French block with an English neighbors, and I didn't speak either of the official languages at the time in Montreal, Ville d'Anjou. And I remember my first instinct was to try to blend in, to just try and fit in, and to try and figure out how to be accepted. And just like our keynote from this morning, Justin Coy, as I grew into a young man, I learned that I actually needed to work twice as hard, be twice as smart, and be twice as strong. And that entitled me to get half as far. So very early on, I figured out this game is rigged. The rules are rigged. And my pivot from the need to fit in came early in my life when I caught myself as a boy laughing at jokes that were made by the crowd that I happened to be hanging out with about other Asians, about other people of color. And occasionally when I endured, labels that were fun to others, but not to me, like a Cheng or a Hop Sing or a Fu Manchu. And then that's when I realized it. I would never fit in. So no matter how smart, how strong, how fast, the game was going to be rigged. And it would be self-limiting if I only allowed my own pathway to be defined by others. Because that would always be defined only in terms of what they would be comfortable with. So that's my pivot. It caused me to become a serial entrepreneur eventually later on in my career, because that was the only way for me to chart my own path, to define myself by embracing my differences and not accepting how others chose to characterize me. Now, not everybody wants to be or needs to be an entrepreneur to find your own voice, to change your own game. But embracing what I think makes us each different and being true to our own worldview is, I think, absolutely crucial if we are to carve out our own space, to create our own table. In many ways, I think, for our young people on this call, don't wait to be invited to the table.
Yeah.
Take your chair. If you can't find your chair, create your own table. In many ways, I think our path forward might have to do with re-examining some of the cultural norms that typically characterize our communities and the way we were brought up. Some of these norms, I believe, don't serve us in the current world of populist sentiments, in which systemic racism is really caused at the end of the day by privilege, which creates unconscious bias, which results in systemic racism when nobody even knows it. Nobody can even see it, except the person experiencing it. And so what are these norms? Again, I come back to my own youth, and I remember, it was like, okay, keep to yourself, work harder, be stoic, keep your head down, be humble, stay silent, wait your turn, you name it. Some of us are going to feel those things just as we recall them. Well, we need to own our own futures in this country. I love seeing Minister Ng. I love seeing Daniel Quan-Watson here. I love seeing Kathy Cheng here. You found your own way, not because of, but in spite of. And so those are my reflections that I think we need to own our own futures, and we cannot expect respect from others unless we respect ourselves first. The old keep calm and carry on, that just doesn't serve us in this day and age. So having said all that, I'll just have one more other last reflection before I hand it back to you, Lai-King. In retrospect, sometimes the lessons in life take a lifetime to learn. And I've come to actually understand now, more than ever, how deeply my Asian heritage has infused my core values and informed my principles for leadership. It's actually taught me resilience. It's taught me tolerance. It's taught me kindness, boldness. And it's also taught me the importance of community over self. I'm proud of that heritage. It shaped how I see the world, and I believe it's made me, and certainly the people I see on this screen here, stronger Canadians. Lai-King.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful discussion. And Yung, I am also a native Montrealer, and I can speak as well to the almost double sense of alienation that people of racialized backgrounds feel in that city. All of you have a common theme of, growing up with the values of hard work, putting your head down and just doing the work. And earlier we had Senator Yuan Wu, who talked about cognitive diversity. We've all heard your stories. Each is different, although there is this common element of growing up Chinese Canadian, the values that has instilled in us. So this is a more intriguing question that will delve into the differences. So what role our own personal agency play in a world where we don't want to get siloed into homogeneity of thought? So we're playing off cognitive diversity. Who wants to start? I'm looking at Daniel, who's nodding his head emphatically, so I'll start with you, Daniel.
That was not my intent. I think Young talked about it very nicely when he said he realized the game was rigged. And I think, in order to succeed in it in our own right, like, we need to reshape the game and not re-rig it, not rig it in favor of different people. But, well, we have the Minister of International Trade here. We believe that barrier-free trade, we believe that artificial restrictions on trade are bad. I think that barrier-free institutions are a good idea. I think that artificial restrictions on who participates, who shapes them, are bad things. And so I think my view of personal agency is to make it obvious where we are doing ourselves harm by not letting people fully participate. We are giving up too much because who we have not brought to the table. We are giving up too much because who we don't listen to. We are giving up too much because who doesn't get to make the decisions. And my personal agency, I think, is given to helping people understand those things. We are not protecting things by keeping people out. We are weakening them. And if you're in public service like I am, I took an oath to make Canada better. And that means recognizing those weaknesses like I would recognize any other weakness facing the system and make sure that we do it better. And I think no one is going to invite you to undo the status quo that has built up over time. It's never once happened. You just have to go do it, and you have to convince people that it's the right thing to do. And every time that's happened in every field, it has boiled down to small numbers of people supported by many other people who have simply said, I'm going to do this.
Anyone want to respond to Daniel's thoughts? Mary?
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I love what Tung said earlier as well, which is, you could prepare and prepare and prepare, but if an opportunity arises and you aspire to lead, go do it. And what is really heartening today, contrast to the example that I think it was Justin who said growing up in the 70s. I mean, I came to Canada, immigrated in the 70s, so I share some of those similar experiences. What is encouraging today is look at everyone that's on this screen and look at everyone that's been here for the last week across the country. So to be pragmatic about it, I give this a lot of thought. I mean, when I first, came to the federal government, I came and joined the Prime Minister's team. And the reason I joined that team was because the opportunity that was there for me was to make a measurable difference in the way that our public institutions would be represented by turning our appointment process into a merit-based one, and that had measurements for representation. So women, Indigenous Canadians, and diverse Canadians, and putting sort of your name on a sign, and to be out there and take that step and go into the public, sort of in the public arena, was scary. It was more than scary. I mean, it was terrifying. But what I think that opportunity really is to think about what some of those pragmatic ways that we could be doing to create these tables in such a way, or enable the new tables to be created in a way that gives, and I think collectively we could be doing something quite impactful. Like, so whether it is being a bit more focused on that Canadian curriculum that the senator sort of wrote about, maybe being a bit more deliberate at looking across the country, or inviting Canadian, Chinese Canadians, Asian Canadians across the country, or encouraging those to participate in civic life. I mean, we are in a democracy, and the price of democracy is participating. And even if it's even if you don't know anything about it, just take the step. And even if it's scary and you don't know what it's about, or the power of one actually can make a difference. And I do think that there is something very wonderful here in ACT and in other organizations across the country now that allow us to perhaps put some focus and enable us together. Because I often felt that many of us were doing some things on our own, and I don't feel that way anymore. I feel that there are many of us, and I feel that there are many of us who have the privilege of being in a range of leadership roles, whether it is in business or in not-for-profit or in the community or in the arts or in law or in the civil service. Like, so how do we come together? And that's why I think today is so fantastic with ACT, because we are together. So so let's think about what that next piece could be that does make it a bit easier for others, that can learn from those of the past and and us here, and to be giving of ourselves to this journey that really then can lift others and lift many, many others in a way where it is about rewriting those rules, because there's no reason that we can't rewrite some of those rules, but rewriting them for what purpose? I mean, as Daniel says, as the deputy says, is to rewrite them to include people, and including is actually what makes the country stronger. It makes our community stronger. So I feel very encouraged by this. I also see that there's a big homework that I think we all need to wrap our heads around, but it's very encouraging, where we are today and what the possibility can be.
That's great. You've talked about a number of things that can be done. Now, these are things that you feel can be done when you're at the table. Are there things that are not, and I'm going to ask Kathy or Yung to pipe in, are there things that you will leave outside of the room, even though you're at the table?
Yung, you want to give it a shot, or?
I can give it a shot. I know you're formulating some great insights, so I don't want to be last this time, Kathy. Look, I break this down into two pieces. There's personal agency, and then there's homogeneity versus heterogeneity of thought, and it relates earlier to my comments about needing to take ownership over our own pathways. That to me is personal agency, where we do not allow others to define where we can go, how high we can go, or who we can go with. And I think that sometimes involves taking authentic, but possibly uncomfortable positions. You need to have your own power within you to expose yourself to taking, authentic, but sometimes unpopular perspectives. Because again, unless you had the lived experience of our lived experience. You don't actually understand what it takes to fight twice as hard, be twice as fast, strive to be twice as smart to get half as far. There's no understanding of that. That's why privilege exists. That's why unconscious bias exists. That's why it results in systemic racism. So the only way for us to break out of that systemic racism box is by having personal agency and not by waiting for someone else to solve the issue. We actually have to move into that space, as uncomfortable as it is, and reset some of these rules. I think also, though, as a community, one of the things we can do is to form better allyship with other diverse communities. Because what do we have in common with Indigenous peoples, with Muslim peoples, with people of color? We are visible, diverse communities. We all encounter the same obstacles and blockages. And when we broaden our tent, we essentially become a power, a force that cannot be shut down. When we are insular, when we only work within ourselves, we are limited by only what we ourselves can do. And I think that's a really important thing, which is take personal agency for what we can do, but broaden our allyship. You know, when the killings in Atlanta happened, I was thinking about, you know, these women could have been my mother, my sister, my friends. The first person to call me was my Muslim brother. The second person to call me was my Vietnamese sister. The third person to call me was my Jamaican Black sister. And it was strange for me because I'm used to working through these things by myself, going through whatever I had to go through to reflect but I didn't know where to go with this. And just those calls kind of opened up my world for me. And right there, my second pivot was, I'm never going to allow these things to go silent again. And unfortunately, we've had more than our fair share in terms of this diet of weekly news. The latest being our Indigenous communities in residential schools. So if you have personal agency, where are you going to apply it? And hopefully we apply it to actually lift up other diverse communities along with our own. That gives us the power we need to change systemic racism, to break out of that box.
I absolutely agree with you, Yuan. In my work and as a lawyer in equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives, allyship was a very, very powerful part of what we did and building those networks. And Kathy, you had spoken earlier about allyships. How does the allyships factor in bringing people to the table?
So if I may, I will share more of a personal story of kind of my journey and how and why I believe allyship is so important. I think back I can tell you right now, the woman in front of you is not the woman that you would have met in 2014. That was the year I was inducted in the EY Winning Women program, which is a very prestigious women entrepreneurial program. And I remember being in that room for orientation, and we had to make an elevator pitch. And that's part of it. You know, they're training you. It's a evergreen development program. I didn't know what an elevator pitch was. I say I'm blue collar, right? I'm factory. I don't need to make pitches. Sorry, I apologize. It's very emotional because that particular incident. I went up on stage, I think like 7 times. I just couldn't get it out. I didn't know what it was. And you're amongst very highly successful female entrepreneurs, right? That are doing this all day long, so they're very refined. And I'm very uncomfortable speaking in public, even being here today, especially amongst this astute panel. It's definitely imposter syndrome at its max right now.
No. Absolutely do not.
No. You belong here, Kathy. Yeah. You absolutely belong here.
It was allyship. And I remember looking in the room and there was less than 5% people of color. And I remember that evening during cocktails, one of my dearest friends and mentor, Phyllis Newhouse, who's a very successful African-American entrepreneur out of Atlanta herself, that night she came up to me, she took me by the shoulder and she said, "You look at me. You may think you don't belong. You walk into a room and they don't look like us, but know that you earned your place and you belong here." And that really reset my whole thought process. And I would say that pivotal moment was the moment where I started this journey of finding my voice. And I'm still on this journey. That's why I feel like such an imposter, even though, I know everyone is very welcoming, but it's something that we have to go through ourselves. And I remember after going through that program, I did share very openly with the organizers of that program, indicating that there needs to be more deliberate intentions to bring and fold more diverse voices. It's not just being a woman. Being a woman in business is one set of challenges. But when you're a woman of color, that is another set of complexity that you have to deal with. So, I apologize. I get very emotional about this story, but I just do believe that I think it's important we recognize that you might think we're at the table, but we're all at different stages of our journey. And I want to encourage those that, to really discover, to find your voice. And as you start using your voice, despite the nerves and the self-doubt like I'm now feeling, and I think what I've discovered is I found this beautiful thing of growing in strength, and not just in the volume of my voice, but in the conviction in which I speak. So, that's just kind of my personal journey, and those that are out there, I hope they recognize if they feel any self-doubt and they're not sure if their voices are important, I want to encourage them and let them know it definitely is. And I constantly put myself in uncomfortable situations so then I can grow. And when I grow, I want to make sure it's my responsibility to open the path for others alongside to grow with us.
It's,
Can I jump in on that, Lai-King?
Yes, absolutely. I encourage you to jump in.
Sure. I want to go back to something Albert Wong talked about last week and a number of times, which is about moral courage. And I think that, what Kathy's just done, and I know what Minister Ng has done, and I know what Young Wu has done, and I've done myself, is you have to, while you're doing proof of concept, which I haven't talked to the other three about, and I'm sure you feel that perhaps similarly Lai-King, but while you're doing a proof of concept, one of the things that you think you want to avoid is making any mistakes. And so, because you don't want to let just down yourself, but others. But the willingness to take chances, like Kathy's just done and what she's done all along, and I know that the minister has done and Young Wu's done and you've done, Lai-King. This is actually what makes great leadership. The greatest leadership is human, and it demystifies the false and the fake notion that there is some statue out there that is perfection and inhuman and rigid. And it's messy. And it's uncertain, and it's about to break 5 times a day. And it's the ability to get up after each and every one of those. So I would say if there's anybody listening here that feels like you're an imposter, I'll bet my next 3 paychecks that there are 5 people on this panel who feel the same way almost all the time. None of you have to answer, but I'll collect your next 3 paychecks after the panel.
Definitely.
Well said.
Yes. Everyone, I'm sure, has felt that way. I know for myself, yeah. I have had the imposter syndrome. And Kathy, I'm sure that each of us have also endured the same painful journeys and found similar allies. I guess I'm going to ask a final question. We're closing in on time, so we have about 10 minutes left. the theme of this summit is Aspire to Lead, and it's in the context of Chinese-Canadian leadership. You heard Justin Poi emphasize networking and connections. Kathy, you spoke about finding someone who really pushed you to believe in yourself. I would like briefly from each of you 2 or 3 actions. Identify 2 or 3 actions that you think are critical to mentor or to provide support to upcoming leaders who are struggling, just like Kathy struggled to be heard. Each of us struggled to be heard or to be seen. And 2 or 3 points that might help bring more Chinese Canadians to the table, or whatever table they decide to define for themselves. Maybe let's start with Mary this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak of it from sort of from where I sit. I said earlier that democracy, the price of admission to democracy is participating, and I really would encourage Chinese Canadians to get involved. There aren't enough of us. There aren't enough of us in civic life, and it is messy. You do have to learn. It does require the time and the commitment, but it also requires a bit of just sticking your neck out too. You have to stick your neck out, and you have to just if you think that you can't make a difference, I promise you, your voice getting involved will make a difference. Think about what a government does and how they affect your daily lives at every single level. At the municipal level, it is about how your communities and the decisions around your communities. At the provincial level, it's about your education. It's about the health. It's about community and social services in any given province or territory. At the federal level, it is how Canada, pursues its objectives and work on the global society, on the national systems, on how we, on the relationships with the Indigenous people. So civic life and government touches all of us. So the one thing I would do is say I would implore people, please get involved, because unless you're participating, and it doesn't matter at what political party, you know what your values are. You know the things that are important to you. You know how you might want to, pursue them. And you'll find a political party that actually most represents your values and how you might want to get things done, or dare I say, how you want to influence things to be done. So I would say, please get involved, because participation is so necessary now more than ever. And I would say that for any of us who are who occupy these spaces that we do, knock on our door, send us an email, reach out to us. You'd be surprised, because you're going to probably get a yes. We're here to listen. Yes, we're here to help. Yes, we're here to do our part. And if we can't do it, we'll put you to somebody else. I think that's what all of us are here to do. And if you get one and there's a no, guess what? Move on to the other, because because one of us will say yes. So get involved and reach out to us and find that yes. I promise you, it's here.
Those are great points, Mary. Let's go to Daniel. 2 or 3 points in the 6 minutes we have left.
Okay, great. I'll be quick. Carry around an X-ray machine in your head and carry around an infrared tester in your head. The X-ray will tell you where the real supports are, where the real strength is. The infrared will tell you where people are being silent. Go find where the strength is, go find where the silence is, and identify it. And support it and encourage it and bring it along, and you'll change the world.
Wise observations. Let's go to Young for your input.
Well, thank you for that, Lai-King. And first of all, I just wanted to thank Kathy for her courage and her bravery. It doesn't come naturally to anybody, but you're opening the door for everybody else here, me included. I started my life as an imposter syndrome guy, and ended up it was my fuel for doing whatever I needed to do next, just because I had to prove myself wrong, you see. So we've already long past that, and it's amazing that you're doing this here with everybody else in the community. My couple of things is that, look, if the game isn't working, change the game. Change the game. Don't just try and work in rules that are rigged. And the second thing is be proud of our heritage. Find those that will seek it out. There are those that will seek it out. Basically, every single speaker here in the ACT Foundation Conference is here to seek it out. And I think my third would just be to maybe make some deposits, more deposits than withdrawals along the way. It's again, maybe a deeply Asian heritage kind of a culture. But when we expand that to a larger tent, everybody has something to give. And by giving, you actually get far more back. Yes, we are a visibly diverse community. We are also, alongside other visibly diverse community, in a position to help. And if you're in a position to help, reach out, offer and make a few more deposits, and you'll be amazed how many withdrawals come back your way. Not that that's why you do it, but it's a law of nature. I don't know how it works that way, but it does. So I think my conclusion is what I started with before. There are so many things that make us strong and powerful as a culture. And for me, there's not a day that goes by, or there's not a company that has gone by where I have built it or invested into it or fought through. My venture company was called NFQ Ventures. It stands for one of the core ideologies that I've embedded into every single one of my companies. It stands for never quit. You can fill in the after yourself. But basically, our culture is resilience. It's tolerance. It's kindness. It's boldness. It's the importance of community over self. Make a few more deposits. I'm so proud of my heritage, and probably more proud now as I understand it and the influence it's had in my own journey. So take it, embrace it, build on it, never be really proud of it, and bring it to the rest of the community at a time when Canada has such an imperative that needs this, and at a time when the world needs a better version of Canada than we've been able to show from a historical perspective.
Yeah,
we can actually do that. I'll conclude my comments there.
Those are very powerful words, especially at this time in Canada. Kathy, do you have some final insights, 2 to 3, or even just one critical action that can contribute to a more equitable table for Chinese Canadians?
Those are very hard comments to follow, but let me give this a try. So one of the things I try to adopt is I learn from the past, and I adopt what I believe is relevant, and I like to bring those values forward to future generations, right? But respectfully leave behind traditions and practices and beliefs that do not align to how I would like to see the future. So, for example, again, being a woman of color in business, there are certain, I guess you could say, cultural nuances, like a female should be at home, or, for example, I'm very, very fortunate that my husband, Ted, is an amazing wingman, and he's really supported, our business and my career. He lets me be me. And I think that's something that I'd struggled with. I was very fortunate he didn't struggle with it, but I did. I'm the one who was struggling with having 2 kids back to back and growing business. And, I guess what I'm saying is now I've realized, okay, that's not the future I want to see for my kids, my daughter. And, I grew up with, Asians, they call you, don't be so bossy, right? And now I don't use those words bossy. I say to my daughter, and I bought her a t-shirt that said, I'm not bossy, I have leadership skills.
Yes.
Yes, wonderful. Those are great words to end this on. Unfortunately, I think we could go on forever. But unfortunately, that concludes our panel discussion and your powerful insights. Thank you so much for sharing with everyone. So I want to thank Senator Yun Wu and Tung Chan for initiating this discussion today, and all you panelists, Daniel, Yung, Mary, and Kathy, for sharing your stories, providing your powerful perspectives on aspiring to a more equitable Canada with full Chinese Canadian participation. Thank you for all your time. And it is now time for our 10-minute break, after which you will be called into breakout sessions. So see everyone in about 10 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Siu-Ming Kwok, and my colleague Randy Poon are on the program planning committee of this summit. In the next hour, we would like to hear from you, and the platform is yours. And I invite Randy to explain to you about the instruction for the breakout section. Randy.
Great. Hi. Thanks, Siu-Ming. I just want to introduce myself a little bit as well. I'm a fourth-generation Chinese Canadian. As a business professor, I co-founded the Soul of the Next Economy Forum, focused on responsible business, and now I serve as an executive coach, helping companies and individuals discover what they're truly capable of, which really aligns with a lot of what we heard today about personal agency. Fantastic work by each of this morning's speakers. So many powerful messages. The call to take your own chair, to create your own table, to define our own pathways, and really to be proud of our heritage and to foster personal agency as well. And then, as they concluded, too, the importance of moral courage. And then, as Mary said, sticking our neck out. So once again, it's your turn to share your ideas and thoughts through the breakout sessions. Before we move on to the breakout groups, I want to walk you through what a breakout session looks like. Once you don't see us on the big screen here, that means we have paused the session and you can actually begin the breakout session. If you're already at a table, as we've noted, except for the facilitators or note takers, please leave the table once the screen leaves, and then wait. We have designated facilitators for each table, and so we ask that you wait a minute so that these facilitators and note takers can get to their tables first. Once they're all settled, we'll make an announcement to let you know when to join the tables. And so when joining a table, we ask that you start at the lowest number first, then move on to the next table. So start filling up table 2, then 3, then 4, up to table 16. And again, if there's no one at your table, go to another table as well. If your table does not have a note taker, please designate someone to do so and email the notes afterwards to events@actfoundation.ca. And a note to facilitators again, if your table is empty, also go to another table as well. So now it's your time to hear one another's voices, to build and foster allyship. So go for it.
Hello, welcome back. And then in the next 10 minutes is the report back section, so that we want to hear from you from each table. We have 10 minutes and we have 11 tables. So may I ask, when you report, so can you condense it like around 1 minute or 1 minute 15 seconds, if possible. And so when you come to stage, please state your name and also your table number. Are we okay? All right. So that, and then please use the raise hand button. And so that when you raise the hand, then our colleague can identify you and bring you on the stage. All right, go ahead. Share your voice.
Yeah, don't be shy. You've got.
Don't be shy. You only have 10 minutes.
Okay, there they are.
Right. All right, say your name and your table number, please. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jeremy, table 4.
Thank you.
share a little bit about our table. One of the things that about taking our seat at the table that came up was not only to have a voice, but the intention behind our desire to be at the table. So if it's really the good of that table or the community, then the people will see our intention and will want to listen to our voice, rather than if it's just trying to gain our voice for the sake of the voice. So that was one point that came up. Another thing was that some challenges is culturally, sometimes we have difficulty in finding our voice, whether it be more introverted or letting other people speak first. So the challenge of being able to speak up and be heard. And part of it, the challenges is recognizing that we're all at different places. We have a privilege of being able to come on Saturday to listen to this, but maybe people who are first generation have to work, or the language barriers, right? So having that grace and not that judgment of, oh, why aren't people voting? Why aren't people active in civically? But having those that understanding for people and having those social supports to support people. And I'll close with one action that our table talked about was the action, not to just jump in and get involved, which is good, but to take what we've heard and reflect on our identity as Chinese Canadians, because part of action needs to stem from an authentic realization of our own identity and who we are, to be able to act with courage and authenticity. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good. Our voice with our own identity. Thank you. Table number 2. Okay. Brittany.
Hi there.
Yeah.
So I was at table number 9, and my name is Brittany True, and there were a number of professors at our table. So our discussion was very very academically focused and study focused, but I thought there were some fantastic points raised. The first one was that we had discussed a little bit about mentorship previously, but they also highlighted that it's important to have mentors that are not only from the Chinese community. If anything, we would want to have someone who isn't part of the Chinese community, not because because of the struggle, but more so if you have someone who's always, they gave the example of, if your parents are first generation, they're going to raise you with the mindset of first generation. If you have a leader and somebody who has sort of established and been here for a long time, it will be easier for them to raise you up. So that was the first fantastic point. The second one was, maybe it's more important to identify as solely, not solely, but as Canadian first and foremost, rather than leading with solely your Chinese identity, because then people will always see you as just Chinese when it comes to times of conflict. And when those situations occur, it'll be, do you really understand what it means to be Chinese? What it means to be Canadian? And are you just relying on your Chinese heritage and using that as the default? Number 3 is that leaders need to give credit where credit is due. It's up to the leaders to raise up those under them. And so if you're in a position of leadership, it's important for you to give credit to, for example, the intern that was working on X project. Number 4 is, we also have to talk about the division within the Chinese community itself. There are so many separate little groups, political groups, and in terms of just our population itself, it's huge. Of course, there are divisions, but they were pointing out how, for example, East Indians, as well as the Jewish community, seem to be very well connected, and they seem to reach better positions of leadership, politically, legally, and just like even in the business world as well. And finally, I think it's the 5th one, it's a lot of internal work and unlearning some of the teachings that are a little bit more traditional in order for us to act with confidence in the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you. Excellent summary. I was at that table, Randy, actually.
Thanks, Brittany.
All right. Next one, Vincent.
Hi, everyone. I had this was table 3. We had a lot of people. Yes, we had a lot of folks who are very experienced. So one of the biggest things that we talked about is succession planning. Even though the younger generation may be good at volunteering, it is difficult to get them committed long term. Succession planning may be successful when we encourage the youth to see a vision we want to build the future for. In Calgary, a lot of folks who are Alberta-based, Calgary youth, it's a vicious cycle because they don't see the impact of decisions at a certain level, whether it be civic or provincial, and they don't see simply don't have that motivation to get involved. It might a solution that was put forth might be good to have concrete examples at the individual level to help encourage the younger generation to step up. Whether it be education through persuading parents that their children need to participate in order to continue to grow the community is necessary. There are some challenges that were identified. One internal narrative that continues to be ongoing is Chinese parenting. No matter how busy the children are, the children will internalize values from the parents, and whether they don't use the old ways or traditions, they need to make young people realize that it is okay to try new things. So yes, history. We need to be aware of history, but we must take ownership of that history, and then realize who you are as an individual, and have that ability to harness that information to be able to engage, to move forward.
Thank you so much. With excellent point.
Thanks,
Succession plan, for younger generation. Good. All right, next table, Sandra.
Hi, how are you? So I was at table 13, and I think that we had a really great discussion, and I had a mix of some very young people at the table, as well as some professional and experienced people. And I think one of the takeaway was really about working together with other racialized groups as well. One voice on our own will not make an impact, but when you have other racialized groups bringing together with the same voice coming out, we will have a stronger position. We can have stronger voice to be able to take it nationally. And I think that's something that we really need to do more of. We haven't put enough efforts in that side. The other part is about one of the individual at our table. She's a psychologist, and she made a very good comment that we need to, in our culture, we have always been told, we keep our head down. We don't speak about anything that's negative in our own culture or in our own family, because we keep those inside. But I think that we need to be more. We need to destigmatize mental health and encourage that communication, and encourage people to speak up and be communicating out there. I think is very, very important in order to get more people to in order to become civically engaged, is to be able to do that. And finally, I think that the last part is about being proud of your own heritage, and know and speak about it in a proud way. Often we don't. Often we just we identify who we are, but then we don't really talk about it because we're so afraid other people may say something negative to us. We need to be proud, and we need to be positive of our own self in order to be able to transpire it out to others, so others will believe in what you are, right? And finally, I think the last thing that we talk about is that mentorship again, and being able to have people around you, positive people around you. That's the other thing, because quite often we group ourselves with negative people. You won't want to move forward. But if you have positive people surrounding you and helping you and supporting you, you're able to climb that ladder a little bit easier, able to voice your opinion a little bit better. So those are some of the takeaways that we had in our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Sandra.
Sandra. Thank you. Strategic alliance and be positive about your own culture. All right, can I have the last table? Last one, because it's time already 12:30.
I think we're going to wrap up after there, assuming actually we're out of time.
We're out of time, so unfortunately.
What? Am I here?
Teresa.
Okay, I'm back. Thank you. So thank you so much, Randy and Su-Ming, for this, and thank you for being the facilitators for the past 3 sessions. Randy and Su-Ming are part of our program committee, along with Howard, Patti, and William Lau, and they have been instrumental in putting this year's program together. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank many of the people, the volunteers, for their dedication to making this summit a success. And putting a summit like this together is no small feat. And many people say, oh, it's just another Zoom webinar. I hope that by now you know this was much more than a Zoom webinar, and that you can see that the effort and commitment that our volunteers have poured into this, is what make this happen. So from fundraising, and I really want to extend my appreciation to Alex, Cheng, Larry, Yuan, who are also board members and sponsors of the summit, Ben Yi, another member who's also a sponsor, Yi Ho Tan and William Wei. And our marketing team, they actually met so many hours and to actually get the word out there so that people know that this event is happening. And special mention to also the small and mighty team, Sharon, Donna, Helen, Brighton, Yijin, David, and Ashton. And of course, to our sponsors, community and media partners, for believing in the vision of our summit and for supporting us. Your generosity is much appreciated. We have 2 more very important components. So I before we continue the networking, I think many people have a few speakers have actually alluded to the importance of effecting public decision making, which is policy. And so I think Dr. Lawrence Lowe and Mary Ng and a number of other people talk about that, because public decision policy is not something out there and up there. Those are things that impact our lives every day. And as active citizens, it is our duty and responsibility and opportunity to influence what is decided by the people at the seat, have a seat at the table. So now I would like to introduce to you to Erica Tao, who is the first female and racialized regional director general for the Western region of Canadian Heritage, having joined the department in 2015. She has worked for several federal organizations over her 26-year career, starting in fiscal policy at Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada, followed by the Federal Treaty Negotiation Office. She then moved to Employment Social Development Canada as a director of a number of different business lines over the years. So at Canadian Heritage, Erica is currently the departmental co-chair for the Committee for Racialized Communities and for the Indigenous Working Group. She is also chair of the steering committee for the Visible Minorities Champions and chairs community supporting Deputy Minister Daniel Quan-Watson in his role as champion. So this entity is an interdepartmental committee with representatives from across almost all federal organizations, with a goal to combat racism and promote equity in the federal public service. In 2021, she received 2 Canadian Heritage Deputy Minister Awards in recognition of her exceptional personal contributions to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and her leadership with the Canadian, with CRC. So Erica, I will pass it over to you to provide some of your thoughts after listening to the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Teresa. I mean, what can I say? I remember sitting in Teresa's office in 2018 with Patti Pon, in which she tried to describe what the summit was going to be like in her mind. And I'm not sure Patti and I quite understood what she meant, but she wanted it done next year. And she recruited Patti Pon right there. And I'm so amazed that the department was able to support her. Amy Huang actually is in the audience, and she's my manager. and she actually found ways to support the first inaugural summit in 2019. That was just 2 years ago. The event this time in this pandemic has been so rich and deep. The speakers, the leaders, the panelists, the volunteers, I think it really shows that there's a huge appetite to talk about these issues, to spend time with each other. I also wanted to say that as a federal public servant, you know, the federal government was responsible for the residential school policy. It is both humbling and shameful. But I believe that unless we get those seats to the table and we make those everyday decisions that sometimes seem unimportant, but which end up being incredibly important, things won't change. So I think I'm going to wrap up to say that please apply again to our program. It's a program that we know we can support you in 2022. And I think based on the amount of commitment, I think some of us who've been successful in our various tables, we've been like the one of one, and it has been very lonely. So thank you to Teresa and all these wonderful volunteers for bringing us together, because we need this community. We need it for all Canadians. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Erica. We look forward to continue to share our learning with you and the needs and perspective of the community, and hopefully we can work together for a better Canada. Thank you. So, so at this point, I would like to maybe just spend a little bit of time to talk about the ACCT, our leadership initiative. So the ACCT Leadership Initiative consists of the following components: the Aspire to Lead Chinese Canadian Leaders Summit that we have just collectively experienced; the Aspire to Act training program, which is the culture and identity focused leadership training program. We also have a public appointment intensive workshop, 2.5 days. And from the request and demand from the community, we'll be developing some tools for youth leadership as well. And if you have a chance to look at the e-brochure, you see that we are actually forming a leadership cohort, and also we anxiously look forward to your participation in next Tuesday's action planning to look at how we best support mentorship amongst Chinese Canadians. So I'm not going to spend too much time on our training program because of time constraint, but I just want to talk a little bit about how our program really responds to a lot of things that have been shared the past 4 sessions. Like in module 1 of our training program, we look at the case on to address underrepresentation and introduction to civic leadership. We look at culture, socialization, and identity. We examine the history of Chinese Canadians, discrimination, systemic racism, and the concept and issue of power that we don't often talk about. So the second weekend, we talk about how to position ourselves as leaders. So many people said, well, I don't really think that I can be a leader. I don't see myself as a leader. A lot of people use the word claim. So how do we claim our full citizenship? And how do we actively engage in civil society? What are some of the barriers to equitable and full participation? And how do we make our Chineseness work for us and be an asset for our leadership development? And module 3 is action for change. So understand and work with communities, understanding the diverse and complex Chinese Canadian community and how we can actually be applying democratic practice amongst ourselves so that we can work more effectively together, collaboratively, and also understanding and accessing opportunities in public entities. So those are some of the things that we offer in our training program. And the civic leadership cohort, we are opening up for application now until the end of August. And we hope to roll out the program sometime in the fall of 2021. So, and I think at this point, I'm going to invite you to join me in welcoming Olivia Chow, who is a former MP and City Councillor for Toronto. She is now the founder and executive director for Institute for Change Leaders. ACCT believes in working in collaboration. During the development of our training program, we reach out to the Institute for Change Leaders. We reach out to an entity called Civic Action Fellows Program in Toronto. And this new CEO, Leslie Wu, is actually with us today. So ACCT believes that there's always room for collaboration and to reduce duplication. So ACCT focus on civic participation and also leadership development, whereas Olivia have something to offer that is, I think, along the spectrum of civic leadership and civic participation. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Olivia.
Hello, Teresa. Thank you for allowing me to join you.
Always.
And, well, how do we claim the seat at the table, especially the political seats? And you and I have both been elected before, and you know it's not an easy journey. And you know, if I when I was 25 or 35 said to my mother that I want to become a politician and become a school trustee or a city councillor or a member of parliament, go, what? Lawyer? Yes. Doctor? Even better. Whatever. But there are people out there that are considering it, and they are in your class. They are graduating, but they might be thinking, I do want to shape the policy. I do want to make a difference, as what Erica was saying, that I want to be at the table, making the law and making the policy. You need to get elected to do that. Having spent 30 years in office, I have recruited a lot of people in the past, and it's not an easy journey. So what I've done, yes, of course, I've set up the Institute for Change Leaders to teach people how to do political organizing. It's nonprofit, it's a charitable organization, it's multi-partisan. And I've been teaching at Hollyhock on how to people on how to run for office. And then as you were preparing the summit 2 years ago, I thought, my goodness, we should have sessions to teach people and inspire them to run for office. And if I could share the screen right now, if my wonderful friends at the table could share the screen, and I just want to quickly talk about on how do we get our voice on the table. Next page. So really it's targeting people to get them to think about running for office, and then understand what does it take, and then what does it mean for you and your community. Next page. And what we want to do is to get them to understand the why. Why do they want to run? What is their core value? And be able to say it, to make the pitch. Okay. And then what is the reality to be a candidate, depending on different levels of government? What do you need to do? What's the technical piece? Oh, you need to fundraise. You need to plan. You have to have a team. You have to recruit, etc. Right? You have to win the nomination. And then how do you plan from beginning to end, systematically? Because if we have people that want to run, we want them to be successful. We want them to realize their vision. So I'm hoping that we have people that might be interested. And Teresa, when they finish your course or they want to join now, if there's enough interest, enough support, then we can then go out and bring other folks in and have a program that is specifically targeting Asian Canadians. I'm already doing that kind of course at Hollyhock for other folks. Why not for this community. So that's my pitch, and I look forward to working with you, Teresa, to join your excellent work, and see many more Asian faces in the House of Commons, in legislation, and in City Hall, because most of the City Hall are middle-aged white male that have been there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And it's about time that we claim that seat.
Well, thank you, Olivia, for what you do and for joining us today. And I hope that we'll have a chance to work together so that we could actually offer more table opportunities to Chinese Canadians.
I'll stay behind to network to see if there are people that wants to join in the team and look at the curriculum and be able to support and get it going, because there's really not a whole lot of time to waste. There's all types of elections in every levels of government that is occurring, that will be occurring.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for taking time to join us. And so we have done in the past few sessions, we want to see how you're feeling after, the session. So at this point in time, we're going to turn your attention to the post tab on the right-hand side. You see a few questions there to gauge how you felt about this session. So so the first question is, did today's session resonate with you? And what level of new insights did you gain from today's session? And the third one is, based on the insights you gained today, what level of new or upgraded action will you take? We would really appreciate if you could participate in the poll. So now we need your help with our action planning on Tuesday. So many themes have emerged over the course of the past few days, and we need your input to decide on the key topics that we need to discuss on Tuesday. So please, again, go to the polls tab and you'll see a list of themes that we have heard in the past sessions. If you could indicate which ones you'll be interested in discussing more about on Tuesday, that would be really great. So, so this include networking, mentorship, Chinatown revitalization, training and leadership development, advocacy and communication, anti-racism. You know that ACCT helped to convene and created the Act to End Racism National Network, and the Strategic Alliance Beyond Chinese Canadian Communities, research development, education, and create a common platform for Chinese Canadians. So please do participate in the poll, and we would love to hear from you. And I know that many of you are eager to do one last networking before you head out. So we now have some VIPs who'll be hosting tables, but also feel free to connect and mingle. You probably know about the start networking button by now. So what I will do is to provide you with the list of VIPs today that are hosting tables. So at table 3, we have Tung Chen. Table 5, we have Deputy Minister Daniel Quan-Watson. At table 8, we have Justin Poi. Table 9, Deputy Minister from Alberta, Beverly Yee. And table 10, Sue Wong, former Deputy Speaker of the Ontario Legislature. Table 11, Erica Tao, who just spoke to us. And table 12, Lieutenant Commander Beth Lei, and 13, Olivia Chow. And then table 15 is for Chinatown discussion, and Sandy Yap is there again. And also, you know that we have a Chinatown strategic session at 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So thank you again for attending the 2021 Chinese Canadian Leaders Summit. And so I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. And tomorrow is Canadian Multiculturalism Day. So happy Multiculturalism Day. And so I look forward to meeting some of you at the networking.